welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Today we're going to have a short but not very interesting video, so we're going to do some catch-up work here. And we're always using tools and whatnot, and they need servicing every so often. So this is my little blacksmith's hammer I use on my kindling splitter. And the handle was really dried up and the head kept coming loose and stuff, so I get time to do some work on it. So first thing to do is take a brush and get any rust out of there. I did that a little earlier. So the handle was really dry, and so I've been soaking it in boiled linseed oil for a couple of weeks. And see how it penetrates the wood when you do it like this. Okay, we'll get the handle out. Let's see how far that's penetrated down into the wood there. Still need to do the rest of the handle, but when it has that much linseed oil in it, it swells up, and so the head will stay on it really well. So dump our excess back in here and save it. So the next thing we're going to do is service the rest of the handle here. Over time, grease, oil. This is a really old hammer. Gets down in the wood, and then the linseed oil doesn't want to penetrate it. So what we're going to do with it here, set it up, and this is what I use for stripping any varnish or old crapola off them. So knife that a friend of mine used to use when he'd go fishing, he used it to cut the fish up with it, but it's carbon steel. Carbon steel holds the best edge, so this needs a real minor sharpening. But so we'll be back and show you that here in just a minute. Well, the knife edge just needs a touch-up. It doesn't need to be fully sharpened with a file or anything. And so the thing I like using on knives and different things like that is a Lansky puck, which is a very, very common honing tool. It has a coarse side and a fine side. So you start out with a cord and coarse side, and the thing that's interesting is that on their website they say do it dry, but they also sell this oil, and every video I've ever watched on sharpening knives they use oil, so I do too. We'll put a little bit on here. Don't need very much. It soaks right in. So just use a circular pattern like that. Turn it over and do the other side. So we'll be back when we've got it a little closer to being done. Okay, we're going to do the fine side now. Here the sound is totally different with it, so it's getting a nice sharp edge on here. Real nice little fine edge on it now. Now the next thing we'll do, put the handle in here. And we'll just take and draw it down like this. So. We'll come over and do a close-up of this. You can see you got a nice clean wood surface there. So next I just use some steel wool like that and some heavy sandpaper. Okay, well, we'll be back when we're done. Okay, well, we've got it stripped and cleaned up. And you can see, even as horrible looking as it was, the wood is still really pretty decent. It's just really dry. A little chip or two missing out of the bottom, which is not really important, but it's not really cracked or broken anywhere. So anyway, we're going to put the top on and then we'll come back and put the linseed oil on it. Now this is swollen up enough to where this doesn't want to go back on. So we're going to have to pound it on using my vintage snap-on dead blow hammer I've had for over 40 years. There you can see it seated down nice and tight there. So the next thing we're going to do is put a wedge in. Now the original wedge is still usable. It's been beat up on the top. I've been pounding it back in trying to keep the top from the hammer coming off, but you can use a little bit thicker one and a little bit wider a new one. Just perfect. So it's amazing. I don't know how old this hammer was when I got it, but it came from a rural area where they used to do a lot of blacksmithing and stuff for logging, and we quit logging there quite some time ago, probably 40 years ago or so, but that came out of an estate there, so this is pretty darn old. Usually I heat the oil before I put it on, but I didn't want to go to all that trouble today. Get a nice coat of that on there and kind of work it in. Make sure you do the end. Anyway, we've got some other projects we're going to do, so we'll be back after a bit. Well, here's a little project we just finished. A file station for chainsaw chain filing. Until recently, I've always just done it by hand, but you know, I got my bell saw bench chainsaw grinder set up, and we'll show you just a bit here, but I wanted to put this up on the wall right above my bench and then I'll mark what each one fits, and then I'll mark what size the file are on the top, and that'll make it real easy. So these are the most common ones here, and I'll still be using my furred files because after experimenting with a bell saw a little bit, it really sharpens a chain perfect, but removes a lot of material, and a lot of times they just don't need that much of a sharpening. So majority of my stuff's still going to be done with these, so I'll put this up on the wall and I'll put these up right above them. So anyway, out to the man cave. Well, we're in the man cave here. So this area and this bench is going to be strictly for working on chainsaws and small gas engines. So here's my file set up, and I'm going to put that right up here. It's handy and out of the way. And then I'll make some holders, and I'll put the furred files right above it or below it, either one. So anyway, I'll be right back. Well, here's the bill saw bench grinder all set up and ready to go. So we'll demonstrate that here before too awfully long. On to more stuff. Okay, well, the next part of the operation is I've got all these safety chains, or no-use-em chains. I don't use them hardly ever. Most of them are brand new, but I'm going to make a rack and put them in the very corner of the cave here just to hang them all up. And so if anybody needs one around here, I'll have one for them. The other thing we're going to do, like I say, it's going to be for working on small engines and chainsaws. Here's a nice little project. This is an associated 3/4 horsepower 2-cycle engine. It was used on washing machines and small equipment like that. It was a copy of the Maytag engines, but Associated was one of the major suppliers of gas engines from the early teens until about the Depression era. And so this engine was not as good as a Maytag, and it failed commercially, and it was a lot more expensive to make because it had a big expensive magneto on it, whereas the Maytag had a purchased one, a Wyco usually, that fit under the flywheel and was a lot simpler made. But anyway, these are pretty rare and unusual. You know, fits the stuff we collect around this place. And the other thing here is, of course, chainsaws. So we've got Mr. Pooh here that the crank failed on it, so I got to tear it down here pretty quickly and get new crank bearings and a few other odds and ends for it. But anyway, so now we're going to go out and do a little cutting with the chainsaws. Well, we're out here by the wood. This is some of the wood that came from that 145-foot tree that we did the 4 videos on here real recently. But what I wanted to talk about today is pieces that have big knots in them, like this one. The problem, these will fit in my stove, but they got a lot of sap and stuff in them, and it's really easy to overheat the stove with them. So I'm going to be cutting them down into smaller pieces. So anyway, what we're going to be using to do that is a mini log holder here, and I'm going to start out with a Stihl 025 and do a few pieces with it and show you the difference between this and the 031, which this saw is physically smaller, but displacement wise there's only about 4 cc's, which is virtually nothing. But this is a homeowner grade saw, and it's got a 325 chain on it, which I don't like. But anyway, the 031 has a whole lot more horsepower, but it has torque. This thing has high speed and some horsepower, but no torque. So we'll see how easy it stalls out when it gets cutting this tough stuff here. So anyway, I'll be back when I got the saw running. Well, you can see it's got lots of RPM, but when the cutting gets tough, it turns into a weenie saw. So get the old 31 going here and be right back. Yeah, you can see that saw is a lot more powerful, and it cut directly right through that knot, the hardest part there. So, you know, if you're going to buy a small saw, buy the better ones. The little ones just don't cut it. So you see you in your next exciting vintage video.